Fellow Sazaitors, it's been a while since I gave you guys a detailed update on current affairs. The year 2026 promises to be action-packed if recent events are anything to go by. Open defiance against the ED 2030 project within Zanu PF appears to have died down. However, the political temperature remains very high, with claims and counterclaims of death threats being exchanged among party members. Initially, the conflict was between the Geza camp and the 2030 camp. But now, even figures within the 2030 camp appear to be fighting amongst themselves, often attacking one another publicly. Despite this internal turbulence, the party is still pressing ahead with plans to amend the constitution to allow President Mnangagwa to remain in office until 2030. Officially, President Mnangagwa has stated that he will not go beyond 2028. But unofficially, he has allowed his closest allies to mobilize in support of a constitutional amendment that will make it possible for ED to remain in office beyond 2028. And one of ED's allies pushing for the 2030 agenda is this guy, Paul Tungwarara, a man who had effectively given himself Grace Mugabe level powers, a man who mistook proximity to power for a license to bark louder than the top dogs. Zanu aidi dzungu unodzungaira. Meanwhile, we've also seen Nelson Chamisa announcing his return to active politics full-time. He says that he's introducing a movement, not a political party. Chamisa has argued that during his sabbatical, no one was able to fill in the vacuum created by his absence. However, the question remains whether he can still inspire confidence among the masses, particularly those who are angry with him for what they view as abandoning the struggle at a critical moment. Well, of course, Chamisa's absence exposed the lack of leadership among the CCC figures who remained, but it also allowed a damaging perception to take root. There is now a public perception that Chamisa is a quitter, a man who runs away when the going gets tough. There are even allegations, though presented without evidence, that he received a very large paycheck to abandon the struggle. Now, these claims remain unproven, but they are there in the public discourse. Chamisa will have to work extremely hard to convince skeptics that these allegations are not true. Because you see, his job does not give him the freedom to say andikendenge. He must win over as many people as humanly possible. The question is, will he succeed? Well, fellow Sazaitors, slay queens and bingers, socialites, papalites, wasinamalites, varikujgarais, never sinamarites. Welcome to the special report. Recent developments within Zanu PF show a very worrying trend. There are various groups which are operating in the name of the president outside party structures and beyond the authority of the state. But parallel to these groups is an empowerment initiative led by these men. Paul Tungwarara, a man who recently has been giving Grace Mugabe vibes, touring the country in publicized party events and openly attacking senior figures within Zanu PF while presenting himself as a defender of the president. But before we get to that, it is necessary to begin this video with the Ubet Angel prophecy concerning Zimbabwe. Now let me give a disclaimer. I am not validating this prophecy. I am also not invalidating it. I am simply reporting events as they happened. About a week ago, Ubet Angel delivered a prophecy in which he strongly criticized figures within Zanu PF, accusing them of traveling around the country sloganeering at the expense of production. Now it became clear that he was talking about the 2030s, those moving around the country calling for the president to stay on. Angel further warned that if his prophecy was mocked or resisted, there would be 2 prominent deaths and a major revelation of what he described as very dark secrets in high places. Now, as I said before, I am neither validating nor invalidating this prophecy. I am simply reporting things as they happened. Now, Paul Tungwarara took offense at this prophecy because, as you can tell, the prophecy was directed at people like him. In response, Tungwarara addressed a public rally in Manicaland where he was distributing money under the Presidential Empowerment Fund. During his remarks, Tungwarara dismissed Ubet Angel as a chancer and a fake prophet, adding that he considered him worse than a fake prophet. At the same rally, he launched scathing attacks against some Zanu PF officials whom he deemed not loyal enough to the president. Now, what followed was a public outcry, both within and without Zanu PF, with people reminding him of what became of Grace Mugabe. Days later, the Zanu PF Commissariat Department advised all provincial chairpersons that the Presidential Empowerment Program had been suspended with immediate effect. If this directive is enforced, it means Tungwarara's wings have been clipped. The empowerment program, which he has been using as a platform for public venting, has been suspended. But notably, Christopher Manize Muchangwa attended one of Tungwarara's rallies and appeared to support his elevation to the party's central committee, stating that the matter would be discussed in the Politburo, further adding a layer to the complexity of the Zanu PF factional disputes. However, the issue is not whether Tungwarara will eventually end up a central committee member. The real question is how a man who holds no official position within the party and government was able to wield so much power to the extent of traveling around the country, issuing instructions to elected officials. Paul Tungwarara is an advisor to the president. His advisory role is limited to investment. It does not extend to party discipline, ideological enforcement, or the arbitration of factional disputes within Zanu PF. However, at his rallies, Tungwarara repeatedly emphasizes his status as a presidential advisor, often presenting it in a manner that suggests he thinks his advisory role gives him authority over internal Zanu PF factional disputes, despite no such mandate being attached to his position. He is not part of the party's elected leadership structures or even the appointed ones. Despite this, he has been using the Presidential Empowerment Platform to publicly attack party figures while framing these attacks as acts of loyalty to the president and presenting himself as a frontline defender of the president. Tungwarara comes from a new constituency within Zanu PF. This constituency is made up of very rich businessmen who use their wealth to gain influence inside the party. The most powerful of these businessmen is Kudakwashe Tagwirei, a close personal friend of President Mnangagwa. Tagwirei is the man who, according to the Minister of Justice, Ziambi, financed the 2017 coup. Now, this claim was made in Ziambi's response to the Chiwenga dossier. No one within and without the corridors of power has denied this claim. And keep in mind, Ziambi was speaking on behalf of the president in response to that dossier. So since Tagwirei bankrolled the coup that brought ED to power, it therefore can be stated that ED became president because of Tagwirei's money. Using his money and influence, Tagwirei secured a seat in the Central Committee. The Central Committee is the highest decision-making body of Zanu PF outside Congress. The influential Politburo is actually a cabinet of the Central Committee. That means the Politburo answers to the Central Committee. In fact, during the 2017 coup, it was the Central Committee that removed Robert Mugabe and replaced him with Emmerson Mnangagwa as Zanu PF president. I'm just trying to show you the importance and significance of the Central Committee and why Zanu PF businessmen are trying to secure membership in this body. Tungwarara himself is trying, but so far, no luck. But Paul Tungwarara is just one of many people in Zanu PF who are using Mnangagwa's name as currency for personal gain. Some use Mnangagwa's name as a fundraising tool, while others use it as an influence building tool. Some even use it for protection. This has seen the rapid emergence of the so-called 4ED groups across the country. They operate outside formal party and state structures, but more worryingly, some of them have adopted vigilante-like behavior. One of the most alarming examples is the so-called Presidential Anti-Criticism Team, which by its own admission arrested a civilian and delivered him to the Mbare police station.
Tinoda kutaura nokuramba tichiyeuchidza muri yeZimbabwe eze Zimbabwe anti-presidential criticism tanga tichita basa panzvimbo yeMbare ZRP base nhasi papikwa munhu wabatwa neZimbabwe anti-presidential criticism achituka president on public muMbare. Mukomana anonzi Anashe Mundani tichitaura nhasi ava maoko eZimbabwe Republic Police acharara maoko emapurisa mangwana ari kuenda court. So semhuri yeZimbabwe tinokurudzirana tese, let's stop criticize president.
Authorities have remained silent on this. Now that silence has had the effect of normalizing such actions. But let's be very clear on this. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being loyal or showing one's support to the president. Political support is normal in any system. The problem is the method by which you show that loyalty or support. When groups of civilians decide how the president may be spoken about, when arrest and intimidation replace lawful processes, when fear replaces a debate, when the state begins to outsource law enforcement to informal actors, then it's no longer law and order. We have seen this script before. In China, to be exact. During Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution, loyalty to the leader became the highest political virtue, and informal groups were encouraged to police speech and behavior in Mao's name. Everything was done for him and through him. Of course, the comparison with Zimbabwe is not exact, but the logic is similar. When everything is done for the leader, institutions weaken and extremism flourishes. But notice one thing: the chaos, the madness, the drama, it's all in the name of the leader. Now this matters because it feeds into a broader political project, the 2030 agenda. All the 4ED groups overwhelmingly support the 2030 narrative. Political intimidation and all displays of loyalty all benefit one individual, the president. No serious effort has been made to restrain these groups whenever there is need. This raises an unavoidable question: is the president complicit, or at the very least permissive to all of this because it benefits him? Now let's be very clear. There is no public evidence proving that the president personally funds these groups. However, what is known is this: the president is surrounded by extremely wealthy businessmen who are ready to avail funds to support any activity that supports the president. Political loyalty has increasingly become financially rewarded. Public displays of loyalty are often followed by material benefits, thanks to characters like Wikno Chivayo. But what has emerged is a very disturbing culture. Celebrities and musicians openly beg for money. Grown men writing public letters are pleading for financial assistance from Chivayo. Some who are old enough to be his father actually call him their father. Each plea for money is always accompanied by loud declarations of loyalty to the president and Zanu PF. This has produced a dependency syndrome. And the message is very simple. To succeed, you must belong to the Zanu PF ecosystem. Economic survival is increasingly tied to political obedience. In this environment, loyalty to Zimbabwe is conflated with loyalty to the president. Patriotism is no longer love for one's country. It becomes submission to power and its enablers. Criticism is framed as disloyalty, and obedience to the ruling party is labeled patriotism. But this is not nationalism. This is personality cult politics. So Paul Tungwarara is not the core problem. Neither are the 4ED groups. These are only symptoms. The real issue is a political system where informal actors exercise power without accountability, where institutions retreat in fear or silence, and where the president becomes the sole axis around which loyalty, money, and legitimacy revolve. History shows that this path leads to a dynasty, and Zimbabwe should be deeply worried. But whatever happens, I'll be here to marinate you with all the details without fear or favor, because on this platform, we say it as it is. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoy the content, please like and share.